All right, so this is the first blog that I'm going to have you come up with. So it's called the Food and Sustainability Food Choice blog. And this is the description that's written about the blog. So I say students will write a blog of about 600 words. So it could be about 6 to 1,000 words. I'm not counting the words. About how individuals can make better food choices. So the blog must incorporate both theoretical and practical perspectives. Theoretical perspectives and practical guide for people to transition towards better food practices. The blog must address an appropriate audience, make sure the information is well conveyed to the audience based on their level of knowledge of the subject matter. So think about who is it that you're talking to in this, and who do you want to convince to adopt better food practices. And then basically you're going to write to that subject based on their knowledge of the subject matter at hand. Students' video production skills could produce a video instead of a blog. However, you have to approve this through me. Just let me know you want to do this. I've actually let some students in the past do podcasts or other things also. So that's definitely possible. Just let me know if you want to take that route. And I'm just going to make sure that this pertains to the project and you're able to do it properly. So the blog must contain 5 reliable, valid, credible sources. Okay, so this might confuse some people, because in the past, some people think that blog is synonymous with make it up as you go along. And that's not the case, because blogs, in my opinion, should be reliable, valid, and credible, which means that they should be well researched before the blog is written. And blogs could be more playful in the writing, but it doesn't mean that the information should be compromised because of that. So please do your research properly and use valid, reliable, and credible sources. You could actually use things that pertain to things that we've done in class. Some of the readings will actually be credible sources for your blog. Other things as well. Credible sources are things that are verifiable. So, don't go to someone else's blog and just take things at face value without actually doing your research. Look for things that are, peer-reviewed, or things that are actually in academic journals. Although that is not the only source to use. There are other sources that are credible and reliable and valid also that are not peer-reviewed. So if you're unsure if the source is a credible source, come to me and you could ask me. Just rule of thumb usually is this. If you read a source of information and you do not know where it came from, then it is probably not reliable, valid, or credible, okay? So just because someone's reported it in a blog doesn't mean that that information is true. Also, there's a lot of misinformation being spread by people that are actually doctors or other people that are politicians at the present moment, especially, with COVID and all of these things that are in the domain of uncertainty. A lot of even the top leading scientists don't know much about the current context of COVID because it's extremely new, and science is changing based on our understanding about the topic at the current place right now. And anything that happens in science right now will kind of inform the larger body. But there are people that are actually discrediting or providing information that is not credible on a purpose to mislead, confuse, and or basically kind of purport their own political beliefs. There are ways to identify these things, although sometimes it's difficult. So if a medical doctor is giving us advice about how an economy should be reopened, I would say that their specialty is not necessarily about economies. So I would not necessarily trust that as a valid source because they probably studied infectious diseases and other things, and that is not the realm of specialty is politics or economies. So, I would say you could use your own judgment. There are ways of identifying more credible sources than others, which I won't have time to go through all of it today. But if you have questions or concerns, I'm definitely there to answer any of these for you. So I've also provided a grading rubric, okay? So as you could see, you've submitted something, you're probably at minimum gonna get a D if you've at least tried. So I don't intend on failing anybody, but what I'm looking for is your analysis of the subject matter. So, is it just a superficial analysis or are you doing an exceptional analysis? Is it connected to information discussed in class or in the readings or not? Okay, so you should connect this information to what we're learning and do it in a way that is an exceptional analysis. Do your research before you write your blog, And don't try to just cherry pick information that suits your argument. Do your research, figure out what the topic says, and then go about writing it. So clarity and structure, is there a clear and concise, intended specific direction of what you're writing? Does it flow well? Is it structured well or not? So you can see the difference in breakdown here. This is less of my concern, but if we want to publish the blogs, it could be interesting from an aesthetic point of view. So you could put some pictures in your blog and stuff like that. I tell you, look, if you don't do that, it's not going to make or break your grade. But in a blog sense, if you want to make it look like a blog, that could be fun. Grammar and sentence structure also, I'm not necessarily going to count this as one of the main criteria, but it tells me that you haven't proofread your material if there's a lot of spelling mistakes and a lot of grammar mistakes. If it compromises the clarity, then it confuses me and the other readers. So then it becomes an issue. Just make sure you proofread it before, and hopefully there's no grammar and difficulties when it comes to the structure. Information relevance. So I don't want you to just pick anything that will fit into your blog, but actually want you to do proper research. And one way to do that is think of the topic that you're interested in, do your research on the topic, and then write about it. And actually make sure the things that you're bringing in that either complement or go against your main thesis of whatever your blog topic is relevant to the topic. So I know a lot of people will just bring in sources of information because you need to include about 5 sources. So I'm looking at the sources themselves, not that you just brought them in, but actually how they pertain to the topic matter as well. So that is the assignment itself, and that's how I'm grading it. And I see actually some questions in the chat. So I'm going to read a couple of these and just go through. I think some of these were actually about the last topic themselves. Wonderful. I'll get to them then in a minute. So question here, should we submit them as a Word document or PDF? That's up to you. If you want feedback directly in your document, it's easier for me if it's a Word document. But if it's a PDF, nonetheless, I'll still grade it and read it. So either way, whatever you want to do. But if you give it to me in a Word document, I could put comments in and things like that if you want me to. Would you generally consider a newspaper magazine article to be credible in this context? It depends on the context, okay? News articles and magazine articles usually come with a version of spin, and not to say that academic articles don't. Sometimes they do too. But a lot of time the spin depends on how the editorial boards or even the journalists themselves want to propagate a specific topic. And sometimes they're actually bringing information into their topic just to kind of cherry pick and give credibility to whatever they're trying to say. Now, newspapers also are trying to sell things. And usually they're doing this in a fast-paced environment where they're not necessarily looking at all sides of the context, or not that they need to do that necessarily, but they're just trying to get out information as fast as possible to sell this to people. That a lot of the time compromises the credibility or the validity of the information that's being propagated in it. Usually it takes a lot of time to do a proper analysis, and newspapers won't do that if they're just trying to spin things out really quickly. Are we allowed to add pictures to the blog? Yes, I actually highly encourage you to do so. It makes it more interesting for me to read when there's visuals and link to other things. So do that, but if you don't, I'm not going to take away points from you just for doing that. It says wait. So what makes this a blog? More informal writing style, less essay format. Well, look, you could think of this as an essay. You could think of it as a blog. It's kind of like a short essay. You could be fun in your writing style. You could be a little bit more playful if you want to. I'm calling this a blog because we used to try to publish the blogs. If you all want to publish your blog, then that's great, but you don't have to. It's up to you. I'm just using the word blog where I could probably use the word essay also. So that's the questions that I have here. Wonderful, great. The last thing I'm going to say is this, because I don't want you to be misled by the topic at hand. So here we're talking about individuals making better choices, okay? This doesn't mean focus on individual approaches. Like you probably realize from the discussions that I've had every single class, we need to root this into, other things like community-based context. social context, political context. So it's not just about individuals choosing, this version of potato is better than another version of potato, and then we're going to be sustainable. But it's actually about also rooting ourselves into bettering our communities and bettering the political economic context. So it means getting involved in food movements, and it means actually, educating people about food choices. It means, participating in larger food movements also, getting involved with your local communities. So don't think of this as, if I eat this, I'm sustainable, and if I don't eat this, well, then I'm not sustainable, or whatever the case is. That could be part of it, but there's a bigger part of it also, and you need to root this into more of a critique based on what we've been discussing in the course here. So are you going to tell us what the audience is, or you choose? You could choose your own audience. So the easiest way for me to do writing is to actually think of a specific person of who I'm talking to. And, you don't have to do it this way, but what I'll try to do is envision, if I'm talking to somebody that I don't think is well-versed in the topic, maybe I'll picture someone specific, like maybe I'm talking to my grandmother, or maybe I'm talking to this one individual, and actually even visualize this person as I'm writing, as if I'm talking to them. You don't need to do that, though. This is just my own approach, the way that I'm coming to this writing, or, a lot of the writing that I do. But yeah, you could choose the audience that you want to talk to. If you're like making this for an academic audience, obviously you're going to have to be a little bit more in depth. You might use jargon a little bit more, but if you're writing to an audience that has no clue about this topic, well, then you could actually write it without jargon and actually be more informational without kind of losing your audience with big terms and things that are quite complex.